Hello and welcome to Sunlight on the Lino, the podcast that celebrates, discusses and enjoys everything related to South East London's favourite band, Squeeze. On tonight's show, I have the pleasure of talking to the guitarist from a band that are named after a lawn ornament store in New Jersey. I'm talking, of course, about Fountains of Wayne. You probably know their hit song, Stacey's Mum, but did you know they have many other hits, such as Hackensack, Sink to the Bottom and Hey Julie? If you haven't heard them already, I suggest you go and listen to all of their songs right now, as I think they're very much like a North American version of Squeeze. So let's go and talk to Jody Porter, guitarist from Fountains of Wayne. So of course you've been in the absolutely brilliant band Fountains of Wayne, which I think are almost like the American version of Squeeze a bit. You know, there's funny, sarcastic, great lyrics in there as well, with some nice music attached to it. So I can definitely see some parallels there. But perhaps if you tell us about how Squeeze approached you back in 2007, I think it was, and how you ended up supporting them.
Sure. Well, Glenn had been covering Red Dragon Tattoo before we even met him. So we found out about that, and our people got in touch with, Squeeze's management or whatever. And he came out and supported us at a place in London. I don't remember the venue now. Not a huge place, but I don't know, maybe like 1,200. And, he did a full support act acoustic, and then we joined him on stage for That Is Love, or Is That Love, I should say.
Excellent.
Yeah. And, we got a kind of memo, what are we going to do with Glenn? Let's get him up with us. And we got a memo the day before, let's try this one. And it's got a ton of chord changes in it. We had a laugh about that. And then, obviously, we'd always see Glenn, at least, when we were in London. And, in fact, he did a great version of an Adam song that I did for a tribute with a lot of people on the bill, including Glenn, and he did Hackensack and made a video for it and everything. This was at the height of the pandemic. So I decided we needed to throw a little party for Adam because he didn't even get a funeral, And Glenn gregariously put out one of my favorite things. I mean, we had Sean Lennon do a great job with a song of ours called Fire Island. Courtney Love did a song. It was a nice mix of people in their natural habitats doing it from their kitchen because it was fucking COVID all over the place. And getting back to how we got asked, I guess Glenn just said, let's get them on. I think we were already on tour, if I remember correctly. And we're either going to go home or do something on late night while we were in LA. But they were going to be on the West Coast, so I think we did at least 4 or 5 shows with them. I remember at least 2 of them. And that's because one of them is on YouTube with Glenn playing guitar and doing a verse of Red Dragon Tattoo with us. And that was at some really posh outdoor venue in somewhere in the wine country, like Santa Rosa, I think. And it was a really beautiful venue. It's like sort of like the Greek Theater, which I think was the next place we played. And that's in Los Angeles, outdoor amphitheater type of place. And we always wanted to play there, so we got to do that with them. And I remember it was a sort of Hollywood, congregation after party type of thing. And I remember Brian and Glenn and I cut out a little before because it was like, I've seen that person on TV, but I don't know their name. And, I never really liked the meet and greets too much to begin with, but we all said, let's make a move.
Yeah. And I've seen that video of Glenn playing Hack and Sack. He's done it in his studio, isn't he? 45 RPM, and he's sort of wandering around the car park of the studio, and he's playing an organ, I think it is, in his studio when he had the
Oh, so
slightly.
you have seen it?
Yes, that's right. Yes,
Yeah. He plays a ukulele
That's
for solo with no strings on it.
yeah, which is quite interesting because he's added a sort of psychedelic guitar solo to it, which
Yeah.
obviously isn't in the original one. That's on it's on Welcome into State Managers, isn't it?
Well, you know, it would have thrilled Adam beyond belief if he gets a chance to hear that one of these days in outer space. In America, I would have been a teenager at the time, and MTV was, I would watch 120 minutes because I might see a Let's Active video or an REM video or something or a Replacements video, something that I was buying records of, you know. And Squeeze was on enough, like with Tempted and stuff. I can't believe it was 1980 when that came out.
That's right.
But, you know, they and Psychedelic Furs got a lot of primetime MTV action. And certainly they were my favorite bands that you would see a lot of. And Squeeze had a lot more hits than I had realized. And it's not just because I'm a fan and know the deep ones too, but just one after the other. I knew them all, you know. It's kind of, oh, wow, I forgot about that one. Another Nail in My Heart. I was like, shit, that was a great song. I haven't heard that in years.
I've got to ask, as a guitarist, that guitar solo in Another Nail in My Heart is unbelievable. Coming
Yeah,
in
I was
on
going to
the
reference that.
yeah.
We have very different styles, but he's very meticulous and certainly makes some really good choices when it comes to melody.
Your guitar playing, Jody, you've got a very British style of playing, haven't you?
I use British equipment.
I'm very proud. What's your sort of? Have you got a particular sort of guitar, your go-to guitar that's your, the one that you always want to pick up and just play?
I have so many. The answer's like, for you, if you're not a guitar player, maybe it's a bunch of pairs of sneakers.
Yes.
You know. So I'll just grab something, and that's why all my frets are in good shape, is because I have so many guitars. I don't really have a go-to one now.
My son is just learning guitar at the moment. We went and bought him his first acoustic guitar a couple of days ago, and he's just getting that guitar buying bug. It's like a drug, isn't it? Once you get one, it's downhill from there.
Yeah, better not get into the vintage thing.
Oh.
Luckily, I got there before it became, just hilariously too expensive. You know, I've had the luxury of having a lot of endorsement deals, and I would take those out on the road and leave the sort of 58 Les Pauls and stuff like that behind. And, they're all great in the studio. It's not like I just hoard them or anything. I kind of use them all.
Each one sort of has a part, doesn't it? You sort of think, I want to use that guitar now on that song. I almost feel like when I buy a guitar, I've got to put it on a song. I've got to put it somewhere. Otherwise, it feels like I wasted my money. Otherwise,
right on.
Yeah. So, do you have like any sort of good stories of the time that you were touring with Squeeze? I mean, what are they like on the road?
Well, they were very professional, but Mr. Tilbrook would often be holding down the fort with us, around last call after a gig or something, occasionally in a hotel bar. You know how it goes out there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I guess we had tour buses. We kind of interacted on, let's go look at their bus, and they were about the same thing, really.
Who had the bigger tour bus?
They're about the same thing. I think they were Van Hool's.
Right.
You know that company?
Yes. Yeah. So with Glenn's guitar playing, I mean, what do
Yeah.
you? His guitar playing is legendary. There's even a YouTube video I saw today that's just titled "Glenn Tilbrook is the world's most underrated guitar player."
I think when he plays, it's like, the equivalent of somebody that has something to say, and if they don't talk a lot, usually they're pretty prophetic, not pathetic, but
Yeah,
prophetic.
yeah,
And, yeah, that's how I see his place in that band. There's a lot going on, and when he gets his moment, it's really kind of a special moment. I feel like I had to play a little bit more rhythm and lead. We didn't always have a keyboard player and stuff like that. So covering some bases there, and it's very meticulous and very like George Harrison. I would compare him to a little bit.
yeah. Well, I was actually doing an interview with.
Yeah, he plays for the song.
Yeah, I did an interview with another Squeeze fan last night, and one of the things we were talking about is the Lennon and McCartney tag
Yeah,
that Squeeze have always had.
Difford and Tilbrook, and I did a little research just to look at how many folks have been through those doors. I mean, Paul Carrick sang the first verse of "Tempted,"
Yeah.
which was how I was introduced to Squeeze.
Oh.
And, that was the MTV era. Next thing they'd show would be like Motley Crue or something, and I'd just turn it off. But I'd always leave it on for the Furs and Squeeze and any Elvis Costello, anything that was connected with Elvis Costello I loved. And obviously Glenn and Elvis Costello did a duet basically of From a Whisper to a Scream
Oh yes.
on Elvis's record, which was Taking Liberties, I think it was called.
And do you have any sort of particular Squeeze albums that you? Well, what's your favourite Squeeze album? Do you have?
I think it's got to be East Side Story. I listened to it again recently. But, you're asking a guy that sort of stopped being a music connoisseur. I don't listen to a whole lot of music when I'm making records. And I've been pretty busy lately because I took 2 years off.
What? So the last Fountains Away album was Sky Full of Holes, and
Yeah.
since then you've obviously done a few solo records as well, haven't you?
I have in between and after the fact, in fact. And I had a record come out in December of 2020 called Waterways. And then I put out an EP more recently, but Waterways was cool because it was me during the pandemic-ish. I mean, most of it was done before, but it was quarantine time. And, in a way, I wish I had started it right as it became a thing. But, it was kind of finished it off during that period and took it to mix engineers, and they liked it. We put it out on vinyl. It sounds really good.
It's because there was no. Well, there was no further Fountains of Wayne's album after Sky Full of Holes. I mean, what happened? Why was there that sort of silence?
Well, I think we took a lot of breaks in between records anyway. And it was never like any of us said, I'm not doing this anymore. But, the whole business had turned sour and music was free. It's like, do we want to fly out to Billings, Montana for a one-off? And I think people just, had enough for a while. But we never said we were going to do a farewell tour or anything like that.
Because Sky Full of Holes is very different to Traffic and Weather, wasn't it? Which I think was the album just before it, and they're very, very different albums. Where Sky Full of Holes is very almost acoustic, quite folky, whereas Traffic and Weather is obviously very power pop. It was mainly you and Adam on that album. On that album, wasn't it?
Me and Adam, that's right. A lot of guitars on that album. It was kind of intentionally power pop rather than too varied. And I think we were kind of good at being able to transcend the boundaries of power pop and do other stuff, whether it be sort of like an old school country jam or, something a little heavier or something a little folkier.
I've got to ask because I think another parallel between you and Squeeze is, I mean, first of all, I think both bands, so Fountains of Wayne and Squeeze, both had one top 30 hit in the US at least, with Hourglass for Squeeze, and of course we have to mention it, Stacey's Mum, of course, in the States. So it must be frustrating when people.
I heard that at the grocery store the other day.
Oh right, what Stacey's Mum?
Yeah. They lost the patron. I walked right out.
You must be fed up of hearing that song. It's got 500 million streams, hasn't it, on Spotify?
I don't listen to the radio.
Yeah.
And I know that MTV and VH1 don't play videos anymore, so I don't have to worry about that too much.
No, it's all
I think it's become more of a karaoke classic.
Yes. It's because it sounds so much like "Just What I Needed" by the Cars, which is an absolutely amazing song. I think Rick from the Cars thought it was a sample, didn't he, when he first heard it, because of the.
Well, I got to know Rick pretty well because he was working in the A room when I was working in the B room at the same studio.
Oh wow.
On East 2nd Street in New York, and I think he thought. I remember hearing that. I think he thought until he really kind of dug into it that it was him.
Yeah.
And sampled, but they're different chords, and I promise I played them.
Oh right, okay,
But
yes.
the tempo, it's a basic homage. Adam wrote the song, so we always had this thing when we felt like a song we were working on was skirting the limits, like of Cheap Trick or somebody like that, then we would be, because we're friends with these guys, it's like we would make it more like that. Like, let's add that as, I know they did this on the first record, Surrender. And I've got a flare, there's a keyboard part that's almost identical. Whatever. We would always play it up rather than play it down, and I think that's the way to do it. What do they say? Good artists borrow and great artists steal. And we had our own thing going as well, so we would goof off and try and entertain each other a lot.
Because you listen to Welcome into State Managers, and everyone knows it for Stacey's Mum, of course, but there's so many other great songs of them. I mean, Mexican Wine. I mean, that was a tough follow-up, wasn't it, to Stacey's Mum?
Well, it didn't hit because Janet Jackson's Nipple came out at the Super Bowl, which MTV had sponsored. So we had this sort of racy video with little girls pretending to drink wine, which was offensive after they got called out on the Super Bowl thing. They were in a lot of trouble, so they had to go G-rated. They didn't play any hip-hop. They made us re-edit that video, and I guess there's a scene in it where I come up and get a glass of wine off of. It was an homage video for sure, not song, but we pretty much tried to rip off Rio by Duran Duran.
All right, yes, yeah.
And it was Chris Applebaum again who, came up with the storyboard, so to speak. But yeah, it had the dancing girls on a yacht, and it was sort of a piss take, to be a rap video. But MTV, for 6 months after that Super Bowl shindig, they wouldn't play anything like that. It was all, G-rated.
Because I was listening to some podcasts earlier today where you were talking about sort of your early work, obviously with the Bell Tower.
That's right. Yeah, we were in London for 3 years.
That's where you began, wasn't it? So you spent a lot of time in the UK.
Yeah, we were kind of running the indie charts for a while and getting on the cover. I remember at one point we were living in North London, and the Northern Line, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Indeed, yeah.
To get to rehearsal, and just like overnight, since we were in the music papers, and this was like the last edition of Sound. So we were in like the Enemy and Melody Maker. I'm not sure Mojo had come out yet. That was more Fountains era, but Mojo is very kind of the Fountains. But, you know, we all kind of got into the British music tabloids and got a record deal over there and decided it was come home to make the record. And we did it at a place in Connecticut where the Pixies had recorded, among other people. I think it was called the Carriage House in Stamford, Connecticut, if I'm right. Anyway, you know, we kind of made a lot of records over there and then brought what we had back over here and finished it. And then that's when Adam joined the Bell Tower.
And then became Fountains of Wayne later, a few years down the line, about the late 90s, wasn't it, Fountains?
Yeah.
Was it 97?
I think I called him, I can't remember, but I was checking in and I was like, what are you up to these days? And he's like, well, me and this guy, Chris, who in hindsight, I realized I had met when the Bell Tower was playing a gig in Boston because he was a, you know, kind of, you know, confident guy, it seemed like, and I was like, all right, well, that's Adam's friend, whatever, you know. And yeah, Adam and I spoke, and I was just coming out of a relationship which was attached to the band I was in. And he called me up and said, why don't you just come to New York? I was like, well, what are we going to do when I get there? And he's like, we already got the record deal. The record's mostly finished. And I'll switch from guitar to bass if you'll play guitar in our band. And I was like, let me think about it. And at the time, it was only a 2-week tour with the Lemonheads, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
And I've become good friends with Evan over the years, but you know, that's as far as I saw it going, and then it turned into 2 decades. You know, it's a hell of a lot of downtime in between records. But, you know, we made enough records, I think, by the end that we felt we'd said what we wanted to say.
Yeah, but the legacy still continues of Fountains of Wayne. When I've been speaking to people that I'm, you know, talking about Fountains of Wayne, people are like, oh, wow, fantastic. And it's actually surprising because I always think people are just going to say, like when you say you're into Squeeze, people go, oh yeah, Cool for Cats and Up the Junction. And with Fountains of Wayne, people mention Stacey's Mum. But I've had other people who've sort of mentioned other songs that you've done. So I think throughout the years, because of online streaming and like YouTube recommendations, so perhaps when you've watched the Stacey's Mum video, you know, something else, you know, Hack and Sack or, you know, All Kinds of Time, which is quite a popular song this side of the Atlantic as well. It's quite a well-known song. And Prom Theme as well, that comes up quite a lot. There's quite a sort of well-known song by Fountains of Wayne. So it's probably good for over the years that people are starting to, you know, see, you know, the brilliant music and the brilliant, you know, work of, you know, Chris and Adam and yourself and Brian as well, and getting to enjoy the band. It's a bit like Squeeze. I mean, Squeeze are massive now in the UK. They've just gone astronomical over the last few years. I mean, I got into Squeeze in the late 90s, and very few people knew more than Up the Junction and Call for Cats. But you go to now, most people know of them. They're played on radio quite a lot as well. People see them a lot. Their 50th anniversary tour is you know, selling very well at the moment.
Might have to see that if it comes this way. I talked to Glenn about 2 years ago. They were playing not too far from me, and I called Chris to see if he wanted to meet up there. It's about halfway from him and halfway from me, somewhere in Connecticut, I think. And it didn't work out because Chris was out of town or something like that, so I didn't end up seeing him.
Well, that's it for tonight, and I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you'd like to hear more from Jody, go and check out his EP2 that's out now on all streaming platforms. If you'd like to get in touch with me, email me AD, that's AIDY, at squeezepodcast.co.uk, or come and join in our active Facebook group. Just search for Sunlight on the Lino. Until next time, keep listening to Squeeze.